Is awakening a gradual process, as I've often heard you describe it, or is there also some sort of sudden shift that occurs as you've described your own awakening that is spontaneous and not something that is a gradual process?
For you, so far, how has it been?
Very gradual.
Oh, that's good enough. A very drastic and sudden transformation is rare, usually only in the face of very extreme suffering, either that comes from within or suffering that comes from a life situation. Could be a serious illness or complete loss of everything, or whatever it may be, or some other form of pain. Then there's a possibility of a very radical sudden shift. But for most people it is a gradual awakening, and a gradual going back and forth. The awakening isn't necessarily like that. Usually any progress just goes in spirals, one could say. There may be a falling back into unconscious patterns triggered by situations, then a coming out again into more presence. But on the whole, there's a gradual increase in presence that then flows into more and more areas of your life. And then there can sometimes be a sudden burst triggered by some kind of event. And usually it's something that would not normally be called pleasant, and that can bring about a sudden burst in awareness and a sudden reaching a new level. For example, I've had people who've been practicing for some time and again slow growth of presence, but wonderful to see. And then suddenly there's a serious physical condition, and that brings about a very rapid intensification of awareness. In some people it brings about a reaction into deep fear, so they lose awareness. But in many others I have observed an intensification of awareness, especially if the possibility of mortality comes in. And so suddenly there's an enormous influx. But that only came because they've already, for several years perhaps, been practicing living in awareness. And then the slightest, if a big challenge comes in, then that will bring about a sudden, enormous intensification, and that may be the final breakthrough, if there is such a thing. There's not really an end to it, to the deepening that's possible. But be happy with what's happening to you, and if anything else is needed, life will give it to you. Pain is less needed as a spiritual teacher and as a device for breaking down the ego. Pain is needed less for those who voluntarily embrace the arising new consciousness or presence. But those who don't, they're like a shell is around them, and something within wants to grow, but can't. It's pushing up against the shell, and that begins to be painful. Great pain in that. The ego shell is around them. And in many people there is that longing inside, but the egoic patterns are very strong. And then what life tends to do is it knocks you with I don't have anything here. It breaks the shell through some kind of event, whatever it may be. For some people it's losing their job. Could be trigger it, their job and their home. Suddenly the wife leaves you. could be something physical. Whatever it is, there's a shock. And that shock breaks you open. There's a crack that appears, and then the light can come through. And so at first the crack, of course, is painful, and there's some suffering, and then suddenly, intensification of aliveness. And those people, I've met so many over the years, people who have had some kind of blow dealt to them by whatever you want to call it, life, the universe, fate, a blow, and retrospectively they said that was the best thing that could ever happen to me. And so many people have told me I wouldn't be here talking to you if that hadn't happened to me. And I'm sure there are people here who could say the same. I know that I could say the same. If without that intense suffering, I wouldn't be here. So there's always grace hiding behind those seemingly negative events. For many people in our present situation, economic situation, there are many people to whom things like that are happening. It's regarded as generally extremely negative, all the things that are happening, if you listen to the news. But all these challenges are potentially awakening experiences. When everything is absolutely safe for you in life, the ego says, wouldn't that be great? I have a job, and I've got job security because I have a contract that is permanent. It used to be like that, especially in Japan, where once you had a job in Japan, even to some extent in the West, you knew it was for the rest of your life, and the company would look after you to your grave. And you would identify with the company. Your whole sense of who you are was bound up with that. And all that is not, even in Japan, is not the case anymore. So there's fear comes in because of the lack of security. The ego demands security. It says, wouldn't it be great if I had real security? Then I could really, if I didn't have to worry about my job, I could really pursue awakening and presence. No, you would go to sleep. With 100% security, almost everybody, unless there's some other factor coming in, would go to sleep. Nice income every month, and you know it's going to be there in 10, 20 years. Pension plan, life insurance, retirement home waiting for me in Florida. Everything mapped out, nothing can go wrong. Life isn't like that anyway. So even if it were like that on the financial and professional level, of course you would still be faced with the insecurity of your physical vehicle, and you would still be faced with the insecurity of the people around you. Who knows what they do? Your children, your wife, who knows what may happen there? Or the insecurity of even driving your car, who knows what could happen? So, to live with the insecurity or uncertainty about what's going to happen to you and to actually embrace it is a wonderful thing if you can, rather than feel, oh, I don't know what's going to happen to me, the uncertainty of it. Surrender into that uncertainty or insecurity, because it is life. Life actually flows more powerfully into your life when there is uncertainty. That's why people experience inner transformation when they go on a huge journey where every moment is uncertain. And every moment is hazardous too. Who knows what's going to happen next? So journey is almost a metaphor for life, But the essence of every journey is that it's uncertain what's going to happen tomorrow, where you're going to be, what the next step is going to be. Except, of course, if you book a package tour where everything is totally... You will be picked up by the bus at 10:55 and be dropped off your hotel at 10:30, and your meal will be served at such and such a time. And, okay, if you're lucky enough, then maybe something will go wrong. And then you can suddenly experience life. And it's that where transformation becomes possible through. But if you always deny uncertainty, I want certainty, then it's like closing the valve through which life comes in, and the possibility of transformation. That's why traditionally the idea of pilgrimage in all cultures is an important one. It's been lost in the West, where you go on a long journey. Usually you have some kind of destination. In medieval times in Europe, you would go to Rome. It would be extremely hazardous. I mean, traveling from northern Europe to Rome, it would take months and months. And who knows, traveling to some pilgrimage, Santiago de Compostela or whatever, you walk along the trail where the pilgrims go. Now, that was all very hazardous. And the real purpose behind it was never the arriving, it was the uncertainty of the journey itself, which has a transformational effect. People knew that perhaps intuitively, and they would become transformed by their pilgrimage. Nowadays, the few people that still go on pilgrimage, they board a plane, and the plane then lands at Lourdes or wherever they go, and then they go to Lourdes, and then they go back on their plane. I mean, that's not a pilgrimage. But life is to embrace the uncertainty of life, live with it, and begin to love it, not knowing what's going to happen. Because there all creativity gets also stifled by excessive security. Isn't that amazing? If you look at the lives of artists and great writers, most of them, they didn't have a secure, or maybe a few exceptions, but most of them, they didn't have a secure income. A few had, but many had to struggle. They were continuously, survival was uncertain. So that's where you come to life, and awakening becomes possible. I knew a Buddhist monk years ago who he told me he was his teacher in the monastery in Thailand, although he was a Westerner. His teacher, at one point when his teacher thought he was ready, he said, "Okay, here's an air ticket. You get on a plane and you fly to Calcutta. And in Calcutta, you're on your own. No money. They're not allowed even to touch money. No money, no contacts, nothing. You get your air ticket." He got his air ticket, traveled to Calcutta, and stepped out of the plane, and then he did it. Surrendered. Stood at a street corner with his begging bowl. Now, he was lucky because he was a Westerner dressed as a Buddhist monk, so people noticed him. And he was also tall and very good looking. But going into a place like Calcutta, very chaotic, and you're competing with the million beggars. So stood, and it worked. He got invited to somebody's home. Everything worked, but initially fear came, because that was his practice, to go beyond fear, to embrace the uncertainty. Beautiful. So what the world calls negative is not necessarily negative. Don't always believe when you listen to the media and all that. There's always another side to everything. And the difficulties that are being experienced collectively these days are also mean also that there's an opening for many people into awakening through that. So, thank you.